Welcome back to my channel, guys. So we got this beautiful Ford F100 1979, and you can see the paint on this thing is pretty oxidized and faded, especially on the bed. This red is really bad, and the white was really faded too. And I lucked out on this one because the client actually asked me if I could take off these rails, which I was much obliged, because buffing and compounding underneath those rails would have been a real pain and would have took me a lot of extra time. So the time it took to take these rails off was well worth it. So being my first time taking these rails off, I had no idea what to expect as far as how they attached. And what it was is it had these little iron bars that kind of slipped from one side to the other, but since they were kind of rusted and been in there for a while, yeah, they it took a little bit of effort to get them out. So I brought it in close on this other one so you guys can see it again. Other than that, it was pretty easy to get these things out of there. Now you can see that little bar in there. So I just screwed the original bolt back in and then just kind of jimmied it out of there. So I don't even think it made it out of the mid-30s the day I was washing this thing. So I made my soapy water about 90 degrees. So it was quite pleasant to dip my hands in, because I can't imagine washing a car on a day like this without having some at least warm water. But 90 degree water was nice. It was steaming pretty good. The camera didn't pick it up, but on the older vehicles you tend to have a lot of more intricate badging, a lot of raised letters and stuff, and you tend to get a lot of crud underneath. And the wash mitt just doesn't get it at all. So in comes the detail brush, and just work those things, get all the crud out of there. The cleaner you get these things and the more dirt you get out of them, the easier job you have when you're doing your polishing and compounding. So you can see on this door too, there's just so many between the trim and the mirror and the door handle. So just have at it with the detail brush and get all that crud out of there. It was such a tight squeeze getting this thing into the garage. It basically almost touched on either side without folding the mirrors in, which is nice because I don't really like folding them in, because I like to be able to use them to look down the side of the truck once I get past the mirrors and make sure I'm all good. Alright, so I wanted to bring you guys in on this Ford, and you can see this paint up here on top is just super faded. So I'm actually going to hit it with the Rotary, but before I do, I'm going to run a tape line, and then that way I could show you guys a 50-50 of how it comes out. Yeah, you can see this Rotary fighting me right there, because the paint was so flat and it was really sticky. The machine really just wanted to jump around a lot, and I kind of had to fight it a little bit before I got all the product spread out. And it was pretty much the same situation on most of the rest of the vehicle. So just kept it on low speed and worked that compound. I wanted to leave this part in real time so you guys can see, you know, the amount of time that it takes to polish this one little section. And you can imagine, you know, going over the whole vehicle is a pretty time-consuming process. There you go. Look at that difference. And that's just one pass with the wool pad with Meguiar's 105. I think it's time to pull this thing outside. It warmed up a little bit. And yeah, I'll set up the camera out there and let you guys see what I'm doing. I wanted to show you this process. I don't think I've ever videoed this before. But before I compounded or did anything, this was after I washed it and clayed it. I went around with the paint depth gauge and actually measured the thickness of the paint. And you can see 1.5 is very, very thin. Normal vehicles are generally found between 4 and 5. And this thing was 2 in a lot of spots, down below 2 in a few more spots. So I was being real careful, going real slow with the polisher because there wasn't a crazy amount of paint on this thing. Again, you can see on this white, it's just so thin. 1.5 is ridiculous. That said, it was single stage paint, so you didn't have clear coat, so whatever was there was mostly paint. But there was definitely still a bit of caution that needed to be taken and polishing this thing, so I never really went super aggressive at all. Just, you know, erred on the side of caution. Sure, I probably could have got a little bit more correction out of it, but to me the risk really wasn't worth it. Now, one of the big things I like about the Rotary is because you have that nice flexible wool pad. You can really go in smaller spots than you can with some of the Rupes machines where you're really just limited by the size of the pad because there's really not much flex there. So here's a little bit closer view and you guys can see, you know, how slow of a speed I was keeping the machine at and how little pressure I was really using, especially on the super thin white paint. I really wasn't trying to take much off, just trying to bring some shine back. I found a lot of times when you're working with single stage paint, the compound really wants to stick to the paint and not always wipe off, so I just use a little spritz of distilled water and it softens it right up and you can wipe it right off easy. After all the cutting and compounding, it was time to do some polishing. So out came the Duetto. So the cowl was one of the spots I was really worried about. The paint seemed a little bit thin in spots on there, so I didn't compound it at all. I felt that was just going to be too aggressive on this panel, so I just went right to polishing with the yellow Rupes pad and the Drive Auto Appearance Victory Nano Polish and Seal. And I found too with the vents on the cowls, the paint tends to be thinner. You guys can see in this close-up photos, it almost looks like white dimples. That's the paint being really thin. So not only did I measure it being thin, I was actually able to see that it was thin. once again with this mini machine. What a lifesaver, just being able to get under this mirror and just getting so much tighter spots than you'd be able to with the bigger machines. And then I busted out the big machine for the hood. So the hood on this thing had been resprayed, so it didn't need compounding, it just needed a quick polish. And with that nice big yellow Rupes pad on the Bigfoot 21, easy peasy. But I did get to use most of my machines on this one, all the nooks and crannies with the trim and the mirrors and everything. And here it is after the polishing. You can see so much shine has been restored on this. The white is shining. This is before walking down the side of the truck. You can see that red is pretty faded and the white is not shining really at all. And here's after. What a huge difference. I'm sure even on camera you guys can see the major difference there. And for everyone that stuck to the end, get to hear that 351 fire up. And it was pretty chilly, so I had to keep my foot on the gas pedal a little bit to keep it going at first until it was ready to settle down and idle to where I could put it in gear. And then I was off, and on my way to bring it back to the customer, I decided to stop at the beach in my neighborhood real quick and take a couple glamour shots. Once again, thanks for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed the footage of this beautiful truck.